All right, everyone, welcome to the Agile Austin Coaching Meetup. This is a special lunchtime edition because we have two speakers today coming in from the UK. But before we get started, we are going to run through our very quick slides talking about our mission. For here at Agile Austin, we want to connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events, educate the community, and uncover better ways to deliver value through Agile values, principles, and practices. If you would like to be a sponsor or a member, please check out the agileaustin.org website, and it will give you lots of fun information on how to do either. And we deeply appreciate any and everyone who's done that work. These are the board members for 2021, 2022. And for Agile Austin people, I know that elections are coming up sooner rather than later, so be prepared. You get to vote soon. Where did it go? Oh. We have sponsors. We have 3 of them now. Yay. So that's all good. And I'd really like to commend everyone for coordinating their logos to go with the Agile Austin branding colors. I think that was really great. Perhaps not planned, but wonderful. We also have several different meetups. This is the coaching meetup, but we have Agile at Scale, a book club, the Agile Leaders SIG, Lean Kanban, Scrum Master, as well as our monthly speaker series. And if you're interested in volunteering, please reach out, contact at agileaustin.org. I know we need some help with, I believe, media and promoting things different on media channels and the like. Okay, so I'm Erin and Sid is also here too. We have been facilitating and co-hosting this meetup together for a few months now. But we've had this meetup for about 5 years, and I will be transferring off and letting Sid take a starring role starting in about a month or two. It is next month. But we do meet here the first Monday of each month, generally in the evening, and we do this via Zoom. And for the time being, we are going to keep our meetings virtual just because we get some really great speakers this way.
And Erin, do you mind if I plug really quickly? Erin's been an awesome partner. And I am looking for another co-partner. So if anybody's interested in being a co-partner on this, reach out to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will help you learn to become an excellent co-partner if this is something you're curious about. Just upcoming events very quickly. May of 2022, Michael Ackerbauer will be coming to speak about mindful agility and finding balance. The June speaker is Jess Barr, and she's going to be talking about hitting the coaching easy button. And in July, Bob Galen will be here to talk about Extraordinarily Badass Agile Coaching, which is his new book that was published a few months back. And I happen to know that someone did procure 2 copies of that book and will be raffling those off to 2 lucky attendees for that July session. Okay. But tonight we are lucky, or rather this afternoon, we are lucky enough to have Sarah Scarratt and Rachel Gilmore here with us to talk about clean feedback, easy to receive and tricky to deliver. And I do remember that the first time I really started talking to Sarah in particular, but I believe Rachel was also involved, was about a year ago. And this was, I think we were both talking to Deepti Jain and some of that Agile Virgin work. And I think you guys spoke in May, and I think I spoke in June for that group. And that's where I really bumped into them. But it was because these 2 women do such a phenomenal job of modeling and teaching and really holding space for clean language and helping us all to become better practitioners. So with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn things over to them so they can take us through today.
Thank you very much, Erin. So welcome. It's great to see so many people. I'm based in the Loire Valley in France. Rachel, my co-facilitator this evening, is in the UK. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy diaries if you're in the States and joining us for lunch. I can see a couple of faces actually from the UK as well. This is going to be a participatory workshop. We'd like to hear and see from you as many of you as possible. So if you do want to unmute or turn your cameras on, then that would be great. Later on in the session, we will be going into breakout rooms. And again, it will be really lovely to hear as many of you joining in and participating at that time as possible. So we're going to be sharing with you the clean feedback model, which comes from the work of Caitlin Walker, systemic modeling, and we'll put some links in the chat as we go along through this workshop. A little bit nervous with that title there, easy to receive, tricky to deliver. We're hoping to unpack some of that trickiness, separating out what can sometimes seem to be quite complicated, and it does require a little bit of work on your part to make sure that the feedback that you give is received, and particularly that people know how to implement the changes that you'd like to see. So we'll be separating out what we call evidence, things that you see and hear, the inference, the things that you're making up, and the impact. And we'll be considering your state, how you need to be when you're giving feedback and how you need to be when you are receiving feedback.
But before we do any of that, I'm just really, let's get curious, you know, why are you here? You've all turned up in your kind of lunch hours, committed, made some time for this. I'm interested to hear from, you know, a couple of you, 2 or 3 of you. Why is feedback so important to you? Who's got something?
Do you want them to use the chat, or do you just want people to
No,
shout
no,
out?
let's just hear it. Let's have a couple of people to, you know, why is feedback so important for you?
It's hard to grow without getting good feedback.
Yeah, hard to grow without getting good feedback. Yeah. And somebody else who's got something different.
The message is often lossy when you use language to transfer the idea that's in your head into other people's heads. And unlike software, which I assume a number of us work with, you can't undo it as easily when you flub something up or make a mistake. Yeah,
You can't undo it easily when you've made a mistake. And sometimes something gets lost in that kind of translation of what you think and what you want to say. Yes, Aaron. And someone else, I'm just seeing Wen is put in the chat, feedback is knowledge and knowledge is power. Yeah. Let's have one more. Why are you here? You know, why is feedback so important to you?
I want to be able to deliver feedback so that people can use it and not deliver it in a way that triggers them and they're so busy trying to, you know, absorb, but I want them to be able to pick this up, and if it's applicable, be able to use it.
Yeah, Erin wants people to be able to use it and make it applicable. Rachel, I saw your hand go up. Did you have something you wanted? Oh, you popped it into the chat.
I just put it in the chat. Yeah, feedback just doesn't happen on its own. It's not happening automatically that often in my life. So clearly there's a purposeful way to get it going.
There isn't a purposeful way to get it going. And yes, because constructive feedback can be hard. And I'm often working with companies trying to help them create a kind of feedback culture, because we know it's important. We know that's how we grow. We know that we can fluff it up and it's really hard to undo when we get it wrong. But actually, if we can create a feedback culture, this is where organizations are learning and growing and getting better, and they're having this kind of continuous improvement as in the individuals, teams, and at an organizational level. So now we know a bit more about why feedback is important to you. We're going to have a little, you know, why do people kind of shy away from giving feedback? I mean, I know from working with feedback for a long time now that, a bit like Aaron said, you know, we're sometimes worried, aren't we, that we're going to say it wrong. We're going to hurt someone's feelings. We've probably been hurt ourselves in the past by some feedback. And what I think is really interesting is that there is usually a nugget in that feedback. There's something that's really, really useful, but it's all about how it's said. It's all about how that feedback is delivered. I had some feedback given to me years and years ago, and it took years and years for it to actually land. When I realized, what that person was trying to tell me. But at the time, I wasn't in the right state. They weren't in the right state. And the way they delivered it, it just did not work for me. So that's why we get so excited about feedback, is that we're giving people, with the clean feedback model, we're giving people a way to deliver feedback in a way that lands. And also you can use the model to help unpack some of the feedback that's coming your way that is feeling a bit tricky for you to absorb or to understand.
So let's have a little think
yeah.
about when you're giving feedback. What kind of state do you need to be in when you're giving feedback?
Empathy or care for person you're giving feedback to.
Empathy and care.
Mindful.
Mindful. Can I just hold you there for a moment, Erin? Let's just ask Sid another question. Empathy and care. And when there's care, whereabouts is that care?
In the heart.
Hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
do a gesture there?
Yes. From the chest out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for Sid, we've got empathy and care, and it's coming from the heart, the chest out. And Erin, for you, if I can come to you.
Mindful.
Mindful.
You know, and I actually feel like it ties in with Sid a little bit here when you're thinking about empathy and care. I guess when I'm delivering feedback, I'm really thinking also about the other person and how it's going to land with them.
Okay, so mindful and really thinking about the other person and how it's going to land from them. And I've seen, David, you've got a question in the chat, and if you can just hold that question, we will come to that in a little bit. And so we've got coming from the heart, empathy, care, mindful, thinking about how it's going to land. And who's got something different to that when you're thinking about the state that you need to be in order to give feedback?
You're in a vulnerable state because you're taking the risk that it's not going to be received well or that they'll disagree with it. And I think one issue I deal with myself is in the back of your mind, you're worried, is my feedback even correct? What if I'm wrong where I'm coming from? And in general, it can spark a good discussion and you'll learn from it. But the activation energy to do that is a level of vulnerability.
And when you're vulnerable like that, whereabouts is vulnerable?
I would say the heart as well, because the pulse quickens and you feel it kind of all over your body. I know the adrenal glands sit on the kidneys, but you don't really think about them as often.
And it's sparking a kind of discussion, a learning discussion.
Yeah, and you're listening, hearing, you're viewing the other person's body language, knowing that the camera flattens everything and makes us all just a little less human.
Okay, so we're getting some good descriptions here, this vulnerability and being open and caring, mindful, really aware of how the feedback is going to land. Who's got something different again?
I can say a mistake that I've made in the past that this brings to mind, and that is not being able or willing to back off if it starts to like not land right. So you got to, there's like hot state, cold state. You'll talk about it in situations, and it's like as soon as you get that hot state, you have to be able to like pull out. But I'll just keep going forward. You know what I mean? But you got to you have to have control.
What's going on there, Rachel, with your body?
I'm leaning into it. When I'm hitting a wall, I'm leaning in, I'm pushing, I'm forcing. You can't force, you got to back it off.
Well, I think that's tying in with what Michael's put in the chat. So understanding that they might not be ready for the feedback. They did the best they could with what they had at the time, and understanding that feedback is necessary. And from Femi, we've got curiosity. We could ask some more questions about curiosity and find out what kind of curiosity is that kind of curiosity. And I'd like you just to flip your attention now and be thinking about when you're receiving feedback. We've had this leaning in, maybe it's not the right time, hitting a wall, vulnerability, mindful, caring about the other person, this open heart. But when you're receiving feedback, what kind of state do you need to be in to receive feedback? Tim?
Yeah, I think you need to be in a state of trust. I think it all comes down to, there was a book called Radical Candor where they talk about, she put up a chart on her thing about caring personally on a vertical axis and challenging directly on the other axis. And if you don't have the care and the trust, then it becomes manipulative and insincere. And if you have the care and the trust, you can get to the point where, if you have the care and trust, then and you are challenging, then that becomes radical candor. But it's a two paradigm or multi-paradigm thing. And I think that's where it gets confusing, is if you don't have the trust, nothing really works. Hey, look, you got a piece of toilet paper on your foot. That's funny, whatever. But if you say, excuse me, I care about your situation. If I was in your situation, I'd want to know that there's a piece of toilet paper on your foot. Please let me tell you about it.
And just sticking with trust, when you have that trust, where does that trust come from?
Well, it's back to empathy and all the other stuff you were talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so care and a trust and empathy.
But if I don't trust the person who's giving me feedback, I'm probably not going to take the feedback seriously, or it's not going to be in the right place.
Okay, so trusting the person who's giving you that feedback. And we've got relationships and being in a growth state, ready to hear. Trust and humility, open to accepting, oh, it's gone. There are areas you can improve. And I'm curious about that open. Who did we get that one from? Monica. What
And
kind
Michael.
of open? And Michael, what kind of open is that open?
I would say like listening to understand versus listening to respond. Trying to hear what the person that's giving you feedback is saying, and how you can implement and use what they're saying to improve versus, having a response in your mind and saying, well, I did this because of this, just being open to hearing the feedback.
Yeah,
agreed.
But then not defensive. And Monica, you've got something?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think mine was kind of the similar piece where the openness to me is tying into both aspects of trust and humility, but especially the humility. Being willing to accept and know that you don't, like, I don't know everything. I have areas I can always improve. I can continuously improve, and the trust aspect of knowing that the other person wants me to succeed, and even if their advice or feedback doesn't work in that particular moment, it's still another piece that I can keep in mind. It's something that I can always have access to moving forward in the future. Yeah.
So openness and trust, not being defensive, trusting that the other person's coming from a good place. Something about the timing, that's quite an important one for me. I much prefer feedback when I know it's coming. And then I sort of know what to do with it. Be a bit of a surprise when I get unexpected feedback, whether it be good or positive or negative kind of feedback.
And I've stopped saying to people, can I give you some feedback? Because I read a really interesting study where people's heart rate, somebody else mentioned this, the heart rate literally goes up when people use that word feedback. So I think a much softer or gentler way is, can I tell you, I've noticed something, can I tell you what I'm noticing? And that's quite a nice soft way to check if someone's ready for that feedback, and to kind of intro it in and tell them what you've been noticing. So we'd like to give you an opportunity to see what you've been noticing so far, and keep hold of that state. You might want to make a little note of the kind of state that you need to be in when you're giving feedback and when you're receiving feedback, because we're going to give you the opportunity in pairs in a moment to give each other some feedback using our clean feedback model. And just going back to, I think, is it worth, Sarah, just popping back here to David's question, have you defined what feedback actually means? We haven't really defined it, and I don't know if I have a definition as such, but this is where we've got a message, we've got something that we want to tell somebody. And when we use the clean feedback model, we often separate that out into things that we want to tell you things that are going well, things that are working well. We want to tell you things that maybe aren't working so well, and we want to be telling you things that you could be doing differently or would work better. So these are messages with, these three messages: what's working well, what's not working well, and what could be different and better. And that's kind of how the kind of feedback messages that we're wanting to deliver here.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is I've seen a lot of discussions about feedback. And feedback is actually negative. It's actually not positive. It's never been positive. And so because I've seen these discussions, I started looking it up. And one of the areas, I think it was the Science magazine or online, and they were talking about feedback actually reduces a person's ability to perform, whether it's negative or positive. And I thought that was that was rather interesting because for some reason it overloads their information circuits. It distracts them from actually making good decisions. And I'll find where that article is, but I thought it was very interesting. So there was something on the web the other day, it all was positive, but I started thinking about this. What does feed actually mean? When you're being fed something, does that, when you psychologically have it in the back of your head without even thinking about it? Personally, I actually think it's a very negative thing. And this article that I saw on LinkedIn was feeding forward instead of feeding back. And both cases, I thought, well, what are you feeding me? I feel like a dog, right? So my suggestion is using a word like advice. You even said tell. Tell, that's another negative word. Is use something like advice, softer, because it's 100% positive. You can never be negative with the concept of advice. So that's just what I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, and so David's thrown that out there and noticing the impact of language on people. And for somebody like David, using the word advice would work much better, and noticing that feedback can have some very, very strong connotations for people. Heart rate goes up. So always looking, as we do as coaches, around the impact of the words that we use and calibrating around people. And some people want to know the more critical feedback. They're like, yeah, yada, yada, whatever, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Then you get other people who need to hear what's going well, just to open up their ears, to settle their system. They need to hear what's going well. I know that I have to have, in terms of the clean feedback model, that last piece, what could work better? I need to know that because I'm all about putting new things into practice. So these 3 questions that Sarah's put into the chat, what works well, what doesn't work so well, what could be better, can be used independently, and they can be used together if we want to give somebody the kind of really holistic piece of.
On the other side, there's one thing I'm trying to learn is not to be so blunt. That's really, that's not good at all. So I've got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, well, but it's important to know because there's people like David, and some of you will have all had different reactions to the words that are being used. And we want to give you a go with this model so you can experience giving it, experience receiving it, notice the impact, notice what words work for you and which don't. So, Sarah, I don't know if you want to take over here and invite people. We wanted to give you all a kind of shared experience, something that you could all see at the same time. So I've opted to be a bit guinea pig. Sarah?
Yeah. So what we'd like you to do is take a look at Rachel and her Zoom rectangle and just give Rachel some feedback on what you're seeing in, just quickly check that you've not got anything. So, and we just want to volunteer. So can somebody just give Rachel some feedback about what's going on for them, thinking about her Zoom.
What are you noticing?
Rectangle, yeah.
Looks like you have a very clean, well-organized office.
Okay, so let's just get that down. It looks like you have a clean, well-organized office. Okay, so what we want to know is what's the evidence? What are you actually seeing or hearing, Aaron, that's letting you know that it's a clean, well-organized office?
The shelf that's behind her has the books nicely stacked. There's a plant up there as well. There is not a lot of clutter around. It makes it look like any of the items, if they were necessary, are easily accessible.
Okay, so there's nicely stacked books, plant, and easily accessible items. Yeah, easily. Yeah. Oh, I've missed a word. Easily accessible items. And when it's a nicely stacked books, what kind of nice is that nicely?
I think it's the organization, like the ones that are vertical. You could pull any of them out. It's hard to see, but it looks like the spines are showing, so you know which book they are.
Okay. So we've got vertically stacked books with spines showing. We've got a plant and easily accessible items. So how do you know that they're easily accessible items?
I just imagine if I had to reach for one, there's not a lot of things I would have to move out of the way.
Okay. So she's got a clean, well organized office, vertically stacked books, spines showing, plant, easily accessible items. She can reach them without moving anything out of the way. And what are you inferring about that?
That she uses these items often, that she has a dedicated space for an office. I use a virtual background because I don't, and what's behind me is not very interesting. It kind of speaks to like organization as a person, but that's reading a little bit further into it than I would with someone who I've only met for, what's it now, 10, 20 minutes?
Okay, so because she's got nice vertically stacked books with their spines showing, plant, she's a nice organized person?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll check in with Rachel in a bit to find out if these assumptions are true. And what's the impact of all of that on you, Aaron?
It's it makes it easier to talk to someone in an environment like that versus one that's cluttered. It probably has a easier access to thoughts as well.
Mm. So it's easier to talk when it's in an uncluttered environment. Okay. And who noticed something? Let's just check in. Well, who noticed something different about Rachel's Zoom background?
I think it's too clean. I'm sorry, did I jump on someone else? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Carry on, Dave, and then we'll hear from Yolanda afterwards.
I think it's too clean. It's too orderly. It sets a tone of professionalism and knowledge. The books don't look like they've been moved. This is all my perception. I criticize. How I learn is by criticizing.
Let's just hold you there, David. And when you think it's too clean, what are you seeing or hearing that's letting you know that it's too clean?
In here, I'm seeing a person that is a bit controlling. That to me is over-organization, right? So that's what I see. I'd sit down there and I think, oh, I'm talking to a counselor. She's going to pop me some pills soon. It's
okay, and let's just hold you there. So you're making up that she's too organized, and for you it's too clean, that she's going to pop you some pills. But what are you seeing or hearing? Let Rachel know what it is about her background that is having that impact on you. What are you seeing in that background that's making you think that she's going to pop you pills, she's too organized?
Well, for me, when you have a discussion, particularly when it comes to trust, we have this sense to trust certain uniforms, if you like, for want of a better word. And for me to have trust, it's have a looser engagement so the conversation doesn't feel forced. So I apologize. I mean, I'm sure you're not that person. But when I look at the scenery, I'm like, okay, I'm in kind of a straitjacket. Look at me, I'm in a t-shirt. In here, I feel like I need to have a suit on.
Okay, and if I can just hold you to it, what are you seeing or hearing? So is it the same or different? Is it the vertically stacked books with the spines showing the plants, or is there something else that you're seeing in Rachel's background?
Yeah, I mean, there's the order on the shelf, the vertically stacked books and the horizontally stacked books. Because the ball is the shape is where it doesn't look like those books have actually moved a lot. Nice plant. It's very clean, almost to the point of immaculate. So almost suggests that you clean it every day. But
okay, so let's just see what we've got. We've got this noticing that for one person.
Now I'm feeling guilty.
and that's a whole other thing, but let's keep it with what we've got. So we've got the same
For
background.
the purpose of the exercise, David, this is very useful. So don't,
Okay,
don't
thank
feel
you. Thank
guilty.
you.
In fact, people might even accuse us of having prompted you to come up with all of this kind of stuff, but we've got this one background and noticing that it's creating two very different impacts. So for one person, it's, oh my God, she's going to give me pills, I feel in a straitjacket. And somebody else, it's like, oh, this is a place that I could really talk. It's uncluttered, there's space for my thoughts. And this is where the beauty of clean feedback comes, is what we put, getting down to is, what are you seeing or hearing that is having that impact on you? And in this case, we've got the same background, two very different impacts. And you're owning that impact, and you're owning your assumptions. So for David, he's making up that Rachel's too organized. She doesn't look at those books, thinks that she's cleaning her office every day. And for Aaron, he's thinking, oh, great, she's an organized person and she really is using these items. But we're separating this stuff out. And let's check in with Yolanda. What's going on for you?
So I thought that the exercise was to practice maybe giving feedback. Is that okay?
Yep.
So I really like to just preface, I really like what you said, that feedback is knowledge and knowledge is power. So using that to catapult giving Rachel feedback, I would say with empathy and being vulnerable, because I could be wrong. I don't know how she's going to take it. So I would be humble and try to be gentle and say, Rachel, can I give you some advice? I see that we have some things in common. You like to gain knowledge. I see your books. That's wonderful because I love books too. And I just, knowledge is power. And I just wanted to, encourage you to capitalize on that and move your bookshelf behind you so that your audience can get full view of your books. And if I can give you some more feedback, I would suggest put your books, align your books behind you and stand them up so they look like a library, because knowledge is power and it sends an underlying message that you have knowledge. You're the authority, you're the subject matter expert, you have books, they're all lined up like a library, that's your repository, that's your knowledge.
Yolanda,
yes,
let me just hold you there. So you've got empathy with Rachel, and you're seeing her books, and it's working well because it's reminding you that knowledge is power and books is knowledge. Right. And for you, what would work better is if Rachel was to move the books so that our audience could see them. And let's just check, Rachel, what's been the impact of this feedback on you?
Well, it's fascinating. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, if only they knew. If only they knew. My poor plant, if you look closely, it's been Easter holidays and it's all a bit dry and brown at the edges. They are about being in easy reach, and these are like my top books to reference. I did this before and I had this book like that, and some of the feedback I got is like, you're too academic, Carl Jung, oh, you've put me off. So I put it like that. I put it like that, so they're kind of stacked up, so they don't look too heavy, intense, but it is about them being out of reach. I'm not very tired or organized, Aaron, I'm afraid. My partner's always telling me off for how messy I am. You can't kind of see some of the stuff here around me. And I guess one of the inferences I do want people to make is I do want it to feel clean and uncluttered, because this is actually a space for my clients' thoughts. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do, Sarah. Is that what you wanted to hear?
And I'm just wondering, what was the impact of receiving that quite different feedback?
Oh, well, I've got quite a few different variations, so I think I'm doing okay. Okay. I think sometimes when you get like the opposite feedback, I can kind of think, yeah. I think if I got 3 people just went, oh no, I hate your books, They make me feel really intimidated. And I think I might change them. But, you know, Yolanda, she's like connected with me over those books.
Go power. So what we'd like to do now is to give you the opportunity to have a go at doing this yourself. So we're going to ask Erin to put you in breakout rooms in threes. Probably won't have.
I also wanted to point out something else, actually, Sarah. I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but I think in all three of those occasions, those kind of three pieces of feedback that were given to Sarah, people led with inference first. I think we often go with what we're making up in our head about that person. You know, I can't remember the first thing that what did Aaron start with? What was the first line?
It looks like you have a clean, well-organized office.
It looks like you have a clean, well-organized office. That's his inference of what he's seen. And I think there's a real nugget with this clean feedback model, that if you can actually start with the evidence, because it's a really good rigor for you to think, am I just checking, is this a belief system or is this actually real? You know, can I evidence this? If you start with the evidence piece that everyone can see in here, so I've noticed that you've got your books stacked up here on the shelf. Myself and Aaron or David or Yolanda, who are giving you the feedback, I can go, yeah, we're all starting from a position of agreement. We can all see the books stacked up. And then we can explore then it becomes more, people are more settled, more open. We can then explore the multiple inferences that people have made about those books. Yes, Erin, you're on mute, Erin.
I sound so much better that way, though. So is what you're saying, you know, when giving feedback, ground that first in physical reality?
In evidence, what you have seen or heard. And that I think that's where Sarah talks about the model being tricky to deliver. It's really encouraging yourself to really make sure that your feedback is rooted in evidence, in what has been seen and heard. And if you can start when you're about to give, or you've invited someone to receive some feedback, however you want to, or advice, how you've worded it, if you can start with that evidence piece, I find it goes much better because you're both starting from a point of agreement. Right. So I'd invite you, it's not always easy to do, but I'd invite you to give it a go.
Okay. So everyone, I have breakout rooms ready. Some of you will be in breakout rooms of 3, some with breakout rooms of 2, but please notice that Sarah put start with evidence. You know, what are you seeing or hearing over in the chat? So take that with you.
Yeah.
And how long do you want them in breakout rooms?
Sarah, do you want to just give the instructions again? Because I kind of added a bit in there.
Yeah, so it's going to be a bit of a whistle stop. So let's say 7 minutes. And the thing is, it's less the actually giving of the feedback, but really having a go wrestling. So that's why you're in 3s and 4s. Really get down to the nitty gritty of what is the evidence. And give them some feedback. Pick one person, a volunteer who's happy to have some feedback about their Zoom background. But what are you actually seeing or hearing? And like I put in the chat, nicely stacked books. There's still a little bit of an inference. You know, how do I know that they're nice?
Question: should we have a real background?
No. Well, it depends. I'd say
find out what the impact. Yeah.
Find out what they think about your background, David. Are you ready for this?
Sorry.
I sort of like the out of order petrol.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try and get Mike in a group with you. Only joking, Erin.
Okay.
Let's go and have a go. Go and have a go and give some feedback to the other person, trying to use the clean feedback model, separating out evidence, inference, and impact, and see what happens.
Okay. Everyone, if you wind up in a breakout room and there is not someone else there, just come back to the main room and I'll reassign you. All right.
But we'll bring you back quite easily.
All right, here we go.
Okay, good. We're just on time, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yep, we've got one. There's one more person in here with us, just so that you know that. Yeah, I'm just watching.
Well, you might want to pause. I find it helps for your editing if you pause the recording now and then bring them back. Or I guess you can just
Pause the recording.
It might be.
Okay.
Okay, so let's
let me go back.
Let's find out what happened in those rooms. Sarah, what question do you want to ask everyone here?
Well, I'm just really mindful of time. So when we've had, this very brief exploration, you've had a little go in the breakout rooms. What do you know now about clean feedback? Who's got something?
I think focusing on the facts, the evidence that you talked about really does open things up to a much broader discussion. It's freeing. I think it's not so narrow.
Starting with the evidence opens it up to a discussion. Who's learned something different, or who knows something different about clean feedback?
I love the part about starting with factual information, what you see, and then because that leads to the why. And I think if you start with, hey, you're like this, then the initial response is, well, why do you believe that? And tell me the facts. But I started with facts, and so did Heather. She started with some facts and what led her to think that way. So it became much more of a natural conversation than it was, this is my opinion.
Yeah. And if I just pick up, at the beginning, we said it's tricky. And just then, while you were in the breakout rooms, I was talking about my husband, my poor husband, who gets brought into all of these kind of things. And I said to him, I don't like it when you shout at me. And he said, I'm not shouting at you. And then we have an argument about whether or not he is shouting at me.
Sounds like my house.
It's just like, what am I seeing or hearing that I'm calling shouting? Because clearly he's not calling it the same thing. And for me, that's where it's tricky, because sometimes I get so full of my own sense of being right that I still can't really do it now. I still can't really find that evidence of what it is that he's doing. It's something about his posture, it's something about his face, and I call it shouting. So it is tricky, but the more we can find those facts, the things that all of us can agree on, then we're starting from a place where there isn't really disagreement. We can agree on the facts, and then we start looking at the different inferences, the different impacts that they're having. Anything else that you're knowing now about clean feedback?
Just to address what you just said, men generally have louder voices, not drastically louder, but they do. So, in a sense, you're right.
We could go down that one.
No, we don't need to.
We don't go. Yeah, that can be for another meetup. So yeah, so noticing the different inferences that we put on things.
And someone else, anyone else who's got something? What do you know now?
I would say that it's actually can be very challenging to give a purely factual description without putting any interpretation into it. As we saw in the first example of whether the books are nicely stacked or, are they obsessive, whatever, it's just, no, the books are stacked. That's the fact. And almost any adjective you add is going to put in some kind of inference. And so, like, this didn't come up in the discussion, but if you tell someone you arrived late, well, different people have different interpretations of what late is, and 2 minutes after the hour is late to some and not to others. But if you say, well, you arrived 2 minutes after the hour, that's the fact.
Yeah, because that lateness, late is inference. It's so emotive, isn't it? Punctuality, lateness. So actually, if you were 2 minutes after the hour, I can look at the watch. Yeah, that's our evidence. And yeah, it can be really, really hard sometimes to find that evidence. And it's such a great discipline to force yourself to find it before you go herring off and giving somebody some feedback. Sarah, anything else that you wanted to?
Yeah, so think, it really is keeping an eye on your state. What am I giving this feedback for? Am I giving it from the position of I'm right, you're wrong? And if I'm doing that, what's the impact of the feedback going to be on the other person? Or as we heard from a number of you saying at the beginning, you know, it's like a dialogue. So I'm giving this feedback so that we can both learn. And obviously, when my husband's shouting at me, I am right and he is wrong. But if I take myself out of that, you know, I want things to be different. I want there to be a change. And so for him, you know, he needs to be in the state to receive it. So I need to be in the state to give it. And one of the things that I would really encourage you to do, I've got a little grid. I'm just going to show it up here. Is when I'm giving feedback at my best, I'm like, what? And when I'm giving feedback at my worst, I'm like, what? And when I'm receiving feedback at my best, I'm like, what? And giving feedback at my worst. Really think about it. You know, like we've only been here for an hour, but we could go so much deeper onto these topics. Really think about how your state, how you need to be in order to give and receive feedback.
And I mean, this really is, Sarah and I have been working with this model for years, and we love it, and we are feedback geeks. And I do not always give feedback using the clean feedback model. I have to think about it. I have to get in a good state. And, you know, it's taken some years of practice. So we know that, you know, but we would really invite you to just, now you know a bit more about it, give it a go, notice the impact, see if it changes conversations, knowledge, learning around you. And we've got a 3-hour session coming up on feedback. We're putting it on the 20th of June. We're going to put it on in the afternoon, British summertime, 1 till 4, which might mean that some of you on the East Coast might be able to join us. So we'll put a link into that, but in the chat in a moment. But you know, this is a muscle, clean feedback muscle that you have to kind of learn and develop and use differently and calibrate around different people.
You're going to include passive aggressiveness in that 3-hour session?
Would you come if we did?
I think I need to.
I've just put a link to Sarah and I run sessions called Dive Deeper, where we go into subjects a bit more deeper than you normally get. They're 3 hours long, and we haven't released the details for the feedback one that we're going to be doing on June the 20th, but we've got one in the interim coming up on diversity and inclusion, but that is 9 in the morning British summer.
I think I've got one other little thing actually that I'm thinking about is own your feedback. So it's, I can see X, Y, and Z, and this is the impact that it's having on me. And I think we just got a really beautiful example earlier on today with David and Aaron, you know, the same evidence, the same facts, 2 completely different impacts. But if you can go to the person and say, can I tell you what I'm noticing? There's this and this, and it's having this impact on me, and I'm wondering what's happening for you. It really is about creating that. It's a loop. You know, don't like the word feedback, but I think it comes from electricity, and it is about the, you know, the dialogue, the moving from one to the other. So it's, this is what's happening for me, I'm wondering what's happening for you. Yeah. Anything else that needs to be said before we bring this to a close? We know that we're on a lunchtime, quite a tight time box.
Stuff.
Good
yeah,
stuff.
Sarah and Rachel, thank you so much for coming and doing this. And I know that this was done very quickly, and to really do this, you did amazing here, but if, you know, another couple hours, I think would really be great for experimenting and trying and practicing to really cement the skill and to bring it home. So everyone, please note that over in the chat, Rachel did post a couple of things about their work. Also,
sorry to interrupt you, Erin. I'm just going to pop an article as well that we wrote on clean feedback. Just popping that into the chat as well. Sorry, carry on.
No worries. For those of you who would like to talk more about clean language, we did have Caitlin Walker. She was a speaker last autumn on this meetup. That session is recorded and it is up on the Agile Austin YouTube channel. If anybody here is curious about that, would like to watch that, it's always up there. So you can go find it there. I believe Sarah or Rachel, I'm not certain which one, did post a link to Caitlin's TED Talk on this topic as well. And I know that Caitlin is starting to offer some clean language training, is she not? I remember seeing something about that, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
but that's all
Caitlin,
coming there.
it's
So
all there.
everyone,
Thank you.
this was it. We will be meeting the first Monday of May, where Michael Ackerbauer will be coming to talk about mindful agility. So we hope to see any and all of you then. If you could, please connect with either or both Sarah and Rachel over on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, just throw them out over to me and to Sid, and we'll try to get them answered. But that's all we have today, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye.